collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week we talk about the conflict between Israel and Palestine.
Let's not be under any illusion that the arrival of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be much of a game changer for the Palestinian people.
And hear about a call for winter clothes for asylum seekers in Cyprus.
We put out this call, which is mainly for men, but in recent days we were also informed that the women need coats and jackets, so if anyone has, that would be great. Shoes as well.
Joining us on this week's programme, it's a great honour to welcome the founder of Jewish Voice for Labour in the UK. She is Naomi Wimborne Idrissi, and I asked her to join us on the programme because, as regular listeners will know, we have over the past years on many occasions touched on the Palestine-Israeli conflict. Well, how is that going to change, I wonder, with Donald Trump leaving his position in the United States, and indeed with the recent events in the UK when Sir Keir Starmer took over the Labour Party. So, Naomi, there's lots of different things here to talk about, but the bottom line very much is, I think, how these leading politicians view what Israel is doing in the occupied areas of Palestine.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on, Rosie. I must just say I am not the founder of Jewish Voice for Labour, but one of a group of Jewish Labour Party members who felt that such an organisation was required.
What actually made you feel that there was a need for a Jewish Voice for Labour? Why did it get founded in the first place?
That's a very good question. Well, a lot of us have been involved in Palestine solidarity work for a good number of years. So we were very used to being accused of being motivated by hatred of Jews rather than genuine feelings of solidarity with Palestinians and what they were enduring in the occupied territories under Israeli rule. So when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, for many people who support justice for Palestine, this was seen as a huge opportunity and a great positive development because we knew Jeremy as a committed supporter of justice for Palestinians, as he is a supporter of justice for oppressed people everywhere around the world and victims of racism everywhere around the world. So we watched his arrival as leader with great hope, and then gradually we became very anxious about the way he was being treated and the way allegations of anti-Semitism were being deployed against him. And we felt that we talked to other people who were friends of ours who had similar views on the left of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn supporters, and it became clear that for a group of Jews who were very committed both to the socialist agenda that Jeremy was pursuing and also to the Palestinian cause, for us to get together and put our arguments and explain our understanding to other Labour Party members would be something that would be a great service to the Corbyn project. And that's why we set up Jewish Voice for Labour. We're often described as being set up to deny the existence of anti-Semitism, you know? That's the way we're often described, and this is absolute rubbish. We were set up because we were appalled at the misuse and abuse of the serious question of anti-Semitism in order to pursue a political agenda. So that's why Jewish Voice for Labour exists. And we found a huge well of support among members of the party who were sort of knocked back on their heels by the attacks against them. I mean, if you're an anti-racist, pro-Palestinian activist, you know, in the Labour Party, and suddenly you're being accused of being an anti-Semite, you know, hate speech, being accused of hate speech against Jews, it's terrifying, it's alarming, it takes your breath away. Jewish activists with an understanding of this, we were able to come in and provide a bit of clarity.
Right, and it's clarity that has never been properly reported, I think, in the mainstream media, because particularly once the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism was brought out and then seems to me adopted and adapted further and further to suggest that anybody who criticised Israeli policy was anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic. I mean, there's so many muddled definitions here, and I find it extraordinary. I'm looking in from the outside. I consume a lot of media, both print, online and so on, and the view that you've just expressed is hardly ever reported.
Yep, I'm afraid you're absolutely right. It is quite shameful. I was a journalist myself for 20 years, working for Reuters, which is, a major news agency. So I've been horrified to see the way journalists express no curiosity whatsoever about the grounds on which the allegations of anti-Semitism are made. So if you get a mainstream Jewish organisation which is principally conservative with a small c, and in some cases, as far as its leading members are concerned, with a capital C, Board of Deputies of British Jews, for example, if they state the Labour Party is a sewer, a pit of anti-Jew hatred, which is the sort of language that they use, it's violent, upsetting language. If they see that being said, they don't look behind. They don't say, well, what do they mean? Where is their evidence? Who is actually being harmed by this? What are they talking about? That investigation has not happened. And I think it's not happened because there is a sort of establishment consensus, and it's depressing to have to say it, but very few journalists in the mainstream have taken the trouble to look behind the allegations and actually to explore what went on. So there are 14 key allegations that are made against Jeremy Corbyn personally, which we have refuted. I mean, when the election in December 2019 was ongoing, and day in, day out, you were seeing on the media, hearing on the radio, reading in the press, these hateful allegations against Jeremy and his associates. We put out a sort of refutation, which we put on our website, going through all the allegations that were made against him and debunking them. And some of them were downright lies. Many of them were distortions, and a lot of them were just exaggerations of the significance of what was said or done at a particular time. None of them were evidence of actual anti-Semitism or tolerance of anti-Semitism. I mean, some people say, oh, well, of course I don't think Jeremy Corbyn himself is an anti-Semite, but he has presided over an atmosphere in which the Labour Party has become this, sewer riddled with Jew hatred. And we just know that's not true. So, not that there isn't any anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that would be absurd. We're saying that anti-Semitic ideas, unfortunately, are current in pretty well every institution in the UK and worldwide, as are a lot of other racist ideas. But we're saying it's not only is it no worse in the Labour Party, the Labour Party is actually precisely the sort of organisation where Jewish people who are worried about anti-Semitism should be seeking their allies, because that's where their allies are. If there are fascists marching down your street or attacking your synagogue, the Conservative Party is not going to help you, but the Labour Party, your local Labour Party members will. This is why it's such a dangerous set of misapprehensions that have been propagated so widely. Jews were actually thinking they needed to pack their bags and head for some other country to seek safety if Jeremy Corbyn became Prime Minister. Absolute fear-mongering of the worst kind.
That, I think it's fair to say, was part of an agenda. You didn't hear these attacks on Jeremy Corbyn until he became the Labour leader. And he had a huge, long history of fighting anti-racism of all sorts in his many, many years as a politician. So it was only when he became Labour leader that, whatever agenda you want to call it, I know what I would, but I won't say it, decided that this support, lifelong support for Palestinian rights, they had to shut him down. Is that unfair?
It's not unfair. I mean, certainly insofar as there is an Israel lobby, and there is, and there's nothing anti-Semitic in pointing out that a nation state has a lobby which protects its interests. Of course it does. Every state does. As far as the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs goes, and its foreign ministry and its Israeli embassies around the world are concerned, the idea of somebody like Jeremy Corbyn becoming the leader of a major Western nation was horrendous. So they certainly sort of cracked into action as soon as he was elected leader. Of course, the whole host of interest groups in society that do not want a genuinely socialist, internationalist, anti-colonialist political figure heading a major political party. So for the Friends of Israel, this was a great opportunity to hand a weapon to all those in the political and financial and media and security establishment who wanted to destroy Jeremy Corbyn as soon as he put his head above the parapet. So we have a confluence of interests here. Not a conspiracy, I hasten to add, but a definite correspondence of interests.
Can I ask you where you think things stand now? Sir Keir Starmer, if one looks back into some of his connections, is obviously very much the sort of candidate that the Israeli lobby would be pleased to see where he is now. Is this going to make a difference, do you think, to the Palestine-Israeli conflict? And likewise, the departure of Donald Trump, who has been very, very aggressive in his pro-Israeli politics.
Right. Let's not be under any illusion that the arrival of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be much of a game changer for the Palestinian people. Sad to say, I mean, at least they will not be afraid of using the word Palestinian. They will acknowledge that there is such a thing as a Palestinian people with national aspirations. They will acknowledge that because they will do, as Keir Starmer and so many politicians in Britain and Europe and around the world will do, they will talk about a two-state solution. They will talk about concessions that the Palestinians must make in order for the Israelis to feel secure and safe and to be able to make peace. And this is the mantra that's been trotted out for 20 years now, and which has become increasingly meaningless as time has gone on. So Keir is in that tradition. He has financial backers who are supporters of Israel. There's no doubt about that. Nobody's denying that. He is politically aligned with people who take that view. One of the things that's important to note about Jeremy is that he was seen by the establishment as a threat to the sort of North American alliance, as the North Atlantic alliance, because he was obviously not in step with this contemptuous attitude towards the Palestinians that is sort of axiomatic in the White House and has been in Downing Street for many years. So, I mean, obviously the departure of Trump is a blessing because we will no longer have this hateful tweeting coming out of the White House day in, day out, and the promotion of racist rhetoric from the very top echelons of American society. But in terms of the Palestinians, I think the Biden embryonic administration has already said that it doesn't intend to move the embassy back to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem, which would have been a modest symbol of some intention to take Palestinian concerns seriously. So I think it's kind of back to pre-Trump days in terms of the attitude to Palestine, and that was never good.
Yeah, Obama didn't do a great deal either, did he? Can I finally ask you what you think about the fact that this increasing call for people associating criticism of Israel or Zionism with anti-Semitism is having, I think, or may have, a backlash on the Jewish people in general, because people who are real anti-Semites are not getting recognised because so many people who aren't are being accused of being exactly what they are, if you see what I mean. Does that make sense?
Oh, goodness, yes. You have hit the massive nail right on the head there, Rosie. Absolutely. It's one of our big fears. How to put this? If people are accused of being anti-Semitic, and this is what's happening now in this country within the Labour Party, people are accused of being anti-Semitic because they have tweeted support for example, a Member of Parliament, Chris Williamson, who was on the left, a supporter of Corbyn, who was forced out of the party with allegations of some sort of anti-Semitic connection, but never proved because it simply wasn't true. So people are being expelled from the party because they have expressed support for or admiration for this man who was drummed out of the party on false allegations of anti-Semitism. Now, if that's anti-Semitism, then what on earth are we to say about real hatred of Jewish people, which is expressed in many spheres of British society, and I'm sure where you are as well, certainly in America, everywhere in Europe. You're absolutely right. It completely muddies the waters. And I think we were going to talk, weren't we, about the so-called IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, definition of anti-Semitism, which is being used to make this kind of conflation. So it says if you call Israel a racist state, or if you suggest that the establishment of the state was somehow a racist endeavour, that is anti-Semitism. And there are other examples which we could go into, but we probably don't have time, as to why this so-called definition is pernicious, because it makes that conflation. It makes it appear that Jews cannot abide any criticism of Israel. If you criticize Israel or Zionism, you are damaging a Jewish person in their heart, in their identity. It's ironic because I'm 68, nearly 68 years old. I've spent a good 50 years of my life patiently explaining to people that, yes, I am Jewish. However, that doesn't mean I support Israel or everything that Israel does, or that I adopt the Zionist ideology, which was only adopted by many Jews after the horror of the Holocaust. Before that, it wasn't a particularly popular idea at all that Jews should go and live in their own state away from other people. So, it was becoming quite easy to say to people, Jew, Zionist, not the same thing. Jew, supporter of Israel, not the same thing. Now, we're told that it is the same thing. Therefore, people who maybe don't look at the history in any detail or don't study facts with particular attention to detail, look at what Israel does to the Palestinians, say, oh, Israel says all Jews support it. I don't think I like Jews very much. This is happening. This is definitely happening. So this conflation by the Friends of Israel of Jew with Zionist is actually generating anti-Semitism.
Let me ask you one very controversial final question, if I may, because we are getting short of time. Do you think there's even a remote possibility that actually, what you've just said, is the whole reason for trying to stir up the anti-Semitism? Because as long as you can prove there is anti-Semitism, then you can carry on being, and forgive me for this, because I think the Holocaust was absolutely dreadful. Nobody could deny that it was dreadful. But you can't go on being victims of a Holocaust and playing, if you like, dare I say it, the victim card ad infinitum, especially when there are very clear problems with the way you're treating other races yourself.
That is a little bit too conspiratorial for my taste. The idea that the whole thing is concocted in order to provoke anti-Semitism, in order to justify the continued Israeli narrative, which talks about, Israeli security is paramount, we must save the Jewish people from a new Holocaust. There is that narrative, but it's probably in the background, in fact I'm sure it is in the background, when Gilad Erdan's Ministry of Strategic Affairs is concocting its next wave of attacks on the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, for example. That if it can make out that anti-Semitism is even worse than it actually is, or far worse than it actually is, then that will cement the allegiance of fearful Jewish people to the Israeli Zionist project. So there is an element of that, but I don't think it's the motivation.
I didn't want to suggest that was the motivation at the beginning. What I'm trying to say is that I fear that there will be an increase in genuine anti-Semitism because of all this that's been going on, accusing all and sundry of it, and it will put people who never thought of it before off the whole idea and saying, well, why are they doing that?
No, I fear that you are right, and I think we can see signs of it. And it's tragic to see in the UK, the British society that I know best, where, we have our Black Lives Matter movement, we have serious cases of discrimination against people from ethnic minorities of all kinds, and where we should be fighting a united struggle to undermine the far right, which is where most of this stuff is coming from, although it's becoming increasingly normalised in society under the Conservative government that we have at the moment, tragically, it makes it very difficult for Jewish people to be integrated into that struggle because, do you know how many Jewish people there are in Britain? I mean, judging by the amount of coverage that the complaints of the leading bodies of the mainstream Jewish community have been getting, you'd think there must be 3 or 4 million. I'm sure most people think there must be 3 or 4 or even 4 more million people of Jewish origin in the country. The actual number is about 300,000, possibly less. And I think, we have seen signs, sadly, that many people from other ethnic minorities are looking askance at Jews, thinking, why is your racism more important than ours? Why are you giving all this attention? Why are we being told that there's anti-Semitism everywhere, where there is clearly Islamophobia everywhere, having a direct impact on the daily lives of Muslim communities around the country? Why are we not hearing as much about anti-black racism, which suddenly it'll be catapulted into the headlines because something truly horrendous will happen, like a black person dying in police custody or something like that. Otherwise, it's just not important, Oh, these people want to topple statues. That's very, very rude of them. Why can't they let us enjoy our colonial history and stuff? The attitude to black people, to Asian people, to Muslim people, to gypsy and traveller people, and so on, is utterly dismissive and contemptuous. And while Jewish people, or the organisations which claim to represent Jews in this country, are shouting and screaming and accusing everybody of being an anti-Semite, it really is divisive. It's making it harder to fight anti-Semitism, and I think there's some truth in what you say. It could actually be inciting some people to turn to anti-Semitism, to begin to feel distrustful and hostile towards Jews, which is a terrible prospect for us. It really is.
It most certainly is. Naomi, we have to leave it there. I could talk to you for a lot longer because there are so many issues involved in this, but I do thank you for giving us your time on the programme, and I wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Naomi Wimborne Idrissi talking to us there about the current situation in Israel and Palestine, and indeed the effect that the accusations of anti-Semitism are having on politics in the UK. The Cyprus Refugee Council put out a call earlier this week for warm winter clothing for the people who are locked up in the Purnara camp. These are generally asylum seekers, people waiting for refugee status and so on. And to my knowledge, the camp at the moment is very overcrowded. So not only do we have cramped conditions, but we also have people walking around as the temperatures in Cyprus plummet, particularly at night, but they're still wearing flip-flops and T-shirts. So the call is for warm winter clothing, mostly for men, and to give us the details from the Cyprus Refugee Council, it's welcome back to the Cyprus News Digest to Corina Drushotu. Corina, over to you. What's needed and why?
Hi, Rosie. Yeah, so as you mentioned, the numbers have been steadily increasing. Purnara is locked. It's part of the measures to address the rising cases of COVID. With people not exiting the camp, we are now close to 1,000 persons. In the official capacity is closer to 400. So you can imagine the situation and the conditions. Up till now, clothes were provided by the state, mainly through the Red Cross, but there seems to be insufficient supply. So we're trying to cover that, trying to assist. And we've put out this call, which is mainly for men, but in recent days we were also informed that the women need coats and jackets. So if anyone has, that would be great. Shoes as well. Shoes is really important, and please in good condition and washed, because there's very limited facilities to wash clothes in the center right now. Regarding drop-offs, anyone can bring to our office. If you Google Cyprus Refugee Council, we're in the center of Nicosia. If easy, call us beforehand and one of my colleagues will pop down and take it directly from your car, the stuff or the bag. If you're in other cities, we have other organizations. They're doing great work and we can bring you in contact with them. There's a lot of people in need out there, so it's not necessary for everything to go to Purnara. And for any more information, contact us directly.
Contact you on what number?
22205959.
Now, you mentioned the lack of washing facilities. And if you're in an overcrowded camp, double the capacity it was built for, and you did say at the beginning that this was due to COVID measures, well, surely it's a bit of a no-brainer that it must be a hot spot for potential COVID cases to spread very quickly. People are in close proximity, and if they can't wash themselves and their clothes regularly, then surely that's a very unhealthy situation.
It is, but the camp has been sectioned off, so there's many smaller areas that have been fenced off. There are efforts to keep separated persons as they come in. It's not always possible. As long as people were also coming out, this was working. Maybe somebody would have to spend a longer period than the 14 or 21 days, but we had a steady exit as well. But now with the closing of the camp, the people working there are trying their hardest, but I think they're up against an impossible feat because the conditions just don't allow. There haven't been many cases of COVID till now. There are testing going on. We don't know how effectively. What is another issue is the cases that are found positive, there seems to be no more capacity and facilities to move them out. Actually, this morning, the Minister of Interior announced that they are taking steps to identify a new facility to move positive cases out of the camp. We feel this should have already been sorted out. As you said, it's been very easy, even in sectioned off quarters, for the virus to spread really easy. And it's a high number of persons, yeah.
Did I hear that there have also been cases of tuberculosis?
All asylum seekers have always been tested for tuberculosis. So this is a standard test that is given upon arrival. From time to time, there are positive with tuberculosis, though it's important to understand that we have active tuberculosis and inactive tuberculosis, and most cases are inactive. If active, in the past they were moved out to the special hospital in Kiberunta, but I don't know what the setup is now with the COVID situation and the situation specifically in Kiberunta.
Well, we do know that the facilities at the Purnara camp are far from ideal, so if anybody can help with those clothing items, and we're talking particularly, aren't we, about long trousers, long sleeve shirts, jumpers, jackets, shoes and socks, I imagine, all in good condition, and remind us once again the number where people can call to arrange a drop-off, and please do wash them first, because the poor people in there can't really get access, certainly to washing machines. It must be very, very difficult. What's the number again, Corina?
It's 22205959.
Give them a call right now. That is Corina Drushodu from the Cyprus Refugee Council. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.